Good evening and thanks for joining us. There are more questions than answers tonight about a Toronto man accused of plotting a terror attack in the name of the so-called Islamic State and how he was able to immigrate to Canada. Critics are calling it a failure in border security. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson joins us now. Mercedes, what have we learned?
Neithu, the federal government is refusing to explain how a Toronto man was able to immigrate to Canada despite allegedly having taken part in ISIS violence overseas in Iraq before he moved to Canada. Ahmed Fouad Mustafa El-Didi is facing multiple terror charges in relation to a planned machete and axe attack in Toronto. El-Didi was also charged with aggravated assault on behalf of the so-called Islamic State, which the RCMP say took place abroad in 2015. Violence that multiple national security sources say was in part documented in an ISIS propaganda video released in 2015 showing the torture and dismemberment of an ISIS prisoner by a middle-aged man with a sword. Global News has viewed the video that multiple national security sources say is believed to show El-Didi hacking off a prisoner's hands and feet while the man is tied to a crucifix in the desert. Global News is not showing the video due to its graphic content and is not identifying the sources who spoke to us who have direct knowledge of the investigation but are not authorized to speak publicly. Ahmed El-Didi was also arrested along with his son Mustafa in a Richmond Hill hotel. Sources say they had just finished taping a so-called martyrdom video in which they appeared with an axe and a machete as well as an ISIS flag.
So, Mercedes, what does this seem to say about the immigration system?
Well, a lot of questions being raised. We still don't know how or when El-Didi came to Canada because the federal government is citing privacy in court proceedings, refusing to release that information. We did learn that the RCMP got one thing wrong. El-Didi's 26-year-old son, Mustafa, is not a Canadian citizen, as they had stated. Kelly Sundenberg is an immigration enforcement officer who is now retired and become a professor. He says this case is deeply concerning and not the first time security screening in immigration has failed.
This is yet another alarm bell going off about the woeful lacking border security we have in our country.
Sundenberg says the system is under-resourced and that there's a lack of political will to fix it.
There's a lot of people who could have lost their lives because of politicking, and that should really alarm Canadians.
The Conservative opposition is calling for the government to disclose what happened in this case.
We need to know how somebody came into the country after being depicted on camera, allegedly doing unspeakable acts. And then we have other questions. How did this person get citizenship?
And how is this person not on national security sources' radar before the beginning of July, Neithu, which is when the RCMP said they first became aware of the concern? So lots of questions for the government here in Ottawa about our security.
Indeed, there are. All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. Thanks, Mercedes.